Hello, and thank you for joining us for this special podcast from the Athens Banner-Herald and OnlineAthens.com. I'm Donnie Fetter here with reporter Lee Shearer, speaking with Republican gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp. For a separate podcast featuring his Democratic challenger Stacey Abrams, please visit OnlineAthens.com. Thank you, Mr. Kemp, for taking the time to join us today. How's the campaign going so far?
Oh, it's great. We're in the middle of a third day of a little short 3-day bus tour around the state. We did 17 counties yesterday. We're doing 4 or 5 more stops today. Just left Lanier County down in South Georgia and working hard.
Yeah, you've done a lot of these bus tours, haven't you, so far for the campaign season?
We have. It's it's a good way to get in front of people, kind of work the local press like you guys, and let people know we're taking the time to ask Georgians for their vote right in their local community and talking about the issues that matter to our state. It's great to be on the road.
Okay. Lee, do you want to start off with the first question?
Sure. I wanted to ask about something that I read in the Daily Report today. Your appeal of the TRO about the absentee ballots. The state is arguing that casting these ballots is not a fundamental right, but a privilege. Can you talk about that? Do you agree with that?
Well, we're appealing for a reason. I mean, we're following state law, and the left's tactic is to try to circumvent state law by, a radical judge making a ruling in their favor to not follow the law. And, they're trying to change the rules in the middle of the game. We've conferred with the Attorney General's office. They believe that we're on solid ground here. This is an unprecedented move. So we're appealing.
All right.
I know one of your campaign promises is to streamline government. And with that vein, what are you looking to cut if elected governor?
Well,
out of the state budget,
streamlining government. Well, streamlining government doesn't necessarily mean you're cutting it. It makes it mean you're making it more efficient, just like we've done in the Secretary of State's office. Now, we have cut our budget during the recession almost 25%, lost almost 30% of our people, and we're still doing the same amount of work. So, I mean, we had to figure out ways to do more with less, just like everybody did, including, people in the private sector and people with their budget at their home, raising their families and taking care of themselves. But, I've learned a lot doing that, being in the private sector 30 years, using those private sector business solutions to streamline government, cut red tape, and make it more efficient. I think a good example is our new voter registration system that we implemented several years ago. It's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now. But we got a new system. We moved it off the state's old, antiquated mainframe system to a private sector data center. It's a web-based system now. It does more work for the county registrars, making their job easier and more efficient. We've literally saved millions of dollars doing that. We've also cut red tape and streamlined government with our new corporate filing system. We've set records 4 years in a row filing annual registrations with any business in the state of Georgia has to do once every year. So we're very proud of that. We even have it now where you can do that with one click of the button on a free mobile app that we have. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about streamlining government. We've cut out, redundant positions. We've reorganized in our professional licensing division, so we're now processing licenses faster than we ever have before. We're much more efficient. So that's the things that I want to do throughout all of state government.
So more about eliminating waste rather than making cuts.
Well, we're going to make cuts. I've said many times, all these tax breaks we got, tax credits, we need to audit them. We need to make sure that the Georgia taxpayers are getting a good return on their investment for that. So I'm certainly not opposed to programs that are not working. I'll more than be willing to look at those kind of things because, just because you create a government program doesn't mean that it's always going to work well, and many of them do not. So if we're not getting a good value for the tax dollar we're spending, then I'll definitely look at cutting that out and using that money elsewhere or continuing to reduce taxes, which I'm committed to do as well. There's a plan to reduce the state income tax again next year. I'm absolutely going to do that. That's something that my opponent opposed.
Okay. Lee?
I'd like to ask about Governor Deal's criminal justice reform. Georgia, I think, still has a higher percentage of people under correctional control than any other state, despite some reductions in prison and probation numbers with the reforms that the state has enacted over the last 7 years. Does that need to be halted, or will you continue that?
Well, I certainly support what Governor Deal has done in the legislature in a bipartisan way. But I'm running on a campaign for public safety reform, going after drug cartels and street gangs. I have 2 plans to do that. I've been working with local prosecutors and local law enforcement as well as state law enforcement to develop those plans, because we have federal prosecutors that are saying in public that Georgia is a distribution hub to the Mexican drug cartel. It's helping create the opioid epidemic, a meth epidemic, and we're 6th in the country for sex trafficking. That is people buying our children for sex. That's outrageous, and I plan to do something about it. As you know, Lee, just a couple of weeks ago, there was 3 members of the Mexican drug cartel that were arrested up in Banks County. I think there was 10 weapons seized, $400,000 in cash, and I believe over $1 million of methamphetamine or some other illegal drug that those people were peddling to our children and our people in this state. I know just less than, I think, a week ago, or maybe within the last 10 days, down in Tolliver County, just south of us, there was a big drug bust down there, a bunch of dealers down there with methamphetamine. You know, every week we're reading in the paper about a gang shooting or something, a home invasion. And those are the kind of things that I want to build off the criminal justice reform and go after these people that are doing violent crimes and literally killing our children and our people with drugs and opioids.
Now, I want to talk about health care for a minute. I know you're opposed to expanding Medicaid, but how will you increase access to health care without expanding Medicaid?
Well, look, let's be clear about this. Stacey Abrams' plan is not to expand Medicaid. She said that is a first step to having government, radical government take over and have single-payer health care. That is not going to work. I don't supporting a program that's broken. She said that she wants to cut Medicaid and Medicare and raise personal income taxes to pay for that. I think that's a terrible way to do it. It's going to cost, tens of billions of dollars to do that. If you add up all of the plans and things that she wants to give away to people, individual taxes per person in Georgia is going to go up $13,000. Georgians, especially hardworking Georgians, cannot afford that. The better way is my health care plan is to make plans more accessible by having innovation or waivers or exemptions to Obamacare to allow association health plans, have reinsurance to protect people with pre-existing needs, to pass an increase in the rural hospital tax credit, which does have a good return on investment, and it will help save our rural hospitals and work to lower prescription drug costs. That is the way to go, as well as opening private sector markets up, which my opponent doesn't believe in, by the way, and allowing us to be more efficient, reduce costs in Medicaid, which will allow us to increase the provider rate, which creates more accessibility for people that need Medicaid.
Okay. Lee?
Sea levels are rising on the Georgia coast. That's a fact. And a recent United Nations report says we're going to be facing a kind of a crisis turning point in as soon as 12 years. Is that an issue at all to you? And if so, what should we be doing about any of this?
Well, I know, especially places like, from Savannah out to Tybee and recent problems that they've had with the road flooding and things of that nature. I mean, we're going to have to deal with that. I think, obviously insurance companies are. Our climate is always changing. I think there's a debate about, what exactly is changing that. I'm a factual guy. I believe in science, and I look at science and feedback from local communities to work with them on problems of that nature, but it's certainly something that I'll be paying attention to as the next governor.
All right. And I know we're getting short on time. Excuse me. I have just one last question for you. You are a native Athenian. So in your experiences growing up here and being schooled here, will you be taking with you to the governor's mansion should you win?
Well, I think just, growing up in Athens, it's a great town, a great community. I've had great people that have influenced my life all the way back from my Hollywood, excuse me, got a little disruption on the bus that we're on right now. But going back to my Little League baseball coach, Bobby Joe Fuller, my high school football coach, Billy Henderson, the people that influenced me graduating from Clark Central High School left a lasting impression on me. And really it did with a lot of people that we graduated with. And it wasn't just people on the football team. It was, cheerleaders and managers and folks that played in the band and the student body at large. As well as being friends with, some great Athenians, Barbara and Vince Dooley, and going to school with their kids growing up. I mean, they've been a great influence on my life, as well as my mom, who was an Athens girl, and my grandfather and grandmother who were here. And, those are the values that I'm going to take to the governor's mansion. And I've been very fortunate in my life to marry Athens girl Marty, and we're raising our kids there. And it's where I developed the values growing up at Emmanuel Episcopal Church, and keeps me humble to this day. And I'll be a humble, hard-working governor, and I'd like to ask for people's vote and support on or before November the 6th.
All right. Any last word you'd like to say before we have to end the interview?
Well, I just say, too, another big thing that I'm going to be focused on is education. I'm going to invest in public education, give our teachers a $5,000 pay raise. We've got a very aggressive, locally controlled-backed school safety plan, and also going to be focusing on and preserving the legacy that Nathan Deal and Mrs. Deal have focused on with third-grade reading levels and be an advocate for early learning and pre-K programs across the state, and that includes our private pre-K providers, which are providing access in some areas that don't have public school access to pre-K, and that's something that my opponent wants to end. So I just wanted to make sure we get a plug in for education as well. It's a big part of our future in the state of Georgia.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for joining us, Mr. Kemp, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Good talking with you guys.
You as well.
You guys.
You as well.
You guys.